You're welcome to another edition of the Economy and Politics program. I am Ottoabasi Abasiekong. 2024 has been an interesting year shaped by macroeconomic challenges coupled with the impact of the ongoing economic reforms in Nigeria on households. As we reflect on an eventful year, this edition captures the top 10 videos for this program for the year. It began with a conversation with Mr. Kalu Aja, a financial analyst, about why households should prioritize a needs budget for the year.
The question is, how do you avoid inflation? The simple answer is that you avoid the naira. If you avoid holding the naira for a longer period, then you have a chance to avoid the naira inflation, which means you are paid in naira. Of course, you have to spend in naira. But if you want to hold that naira for more than, say, 90 days, you might be well advised to diversify that holding. The conversation you mentioned, the gentleman said the way to avoid inflation, if you are like an investor, is to build a portfolio. And in his portfolio, he talked about fixed income Nigeria, which was giving you very, very high rates. But then he brought in fixed income US, which gives you the 5%, but in the US. He talked about gold, which is to protect the portfolio from the dips and of prices, even commodities, even crypto. He built a basket around Nigerian and foreign asset classes. The idea was to give you growth from the naira asset because interest rates are high, inflation is high, but of course you are defended by holding dollar assets. So the simple answer is not to really invest in one currency. In this case, not to invest in a naira because that exposes you to inflation.
The first quarter of the year, Dr. Ayo Teriba, an economist, gave insight into what Nigeria must do to achieve economic stability.
The reality, of the Nigerian situation, which is a very rare one, Nigeria may be the only country in the world that has that luxury of an easy choice between two futures. What the president refers to as tough choices reside on the scenario that we have been on. If we continue, if our present situation defines our future, it's what I call the traumatic scenario.
Traumatic.
In which we are trying to flog pretty much a dead horse. We are still talking about GDP, we are talking about oil, we are talking about agri, we are talking about manufacturing. When the world is transiting into a post-industrial phase, in which the industrial giants of the past, Japan, Germany, or the industrial, regions of the world, look at the Euro area, are in decline. Japan has been in decline for a decade, and it continues to be in decline because it has to switch out of the industrial mode. There's no industry-led growth anymore. There is no manufacturing-led growth anymore. There is no agri-led growth anymore. There is no export-led growth anymore. So, opportunities on income statements or output-centric opportunities are thinned out. Most of the opportunities now reside on the balance sheet. Opportunities have become asset-centric. And Nigeria is very rare. It is one of the largest countries in the world by population that has huge idle assets that is yet to turn to those assets to optimize them.
With the country's cost of living crisis, Dr. Muda Yusuf, CEO of the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, highlighted the socio-economic implications and policy options.
There's a need to cut down the cost of governance, and I believe that the government can benefit from the studies and research that budget did on our national budget, because that organization had done a lot of study. They have looked at the budget, they have looked at duplication, they have looked at everything. Government can benefit from that and see where we can cut down a lot of expenses in our budget. So that we have a lot of work to do about cutting down the cost of governance, about also the right kind of messaging and signaling to show that, yes, we are in this sacrifice together.
It was also a year to understand from Dr. Folabi Oluwokere, Chief Economist, Analyst Data Services and Resources, how regional cooperation among states can improve infrastructure investments in Nigeria.
We need to have a system where private sector is given its rightful place within the remit of the law, and government sector create the enabling environment, and also make sure that whatever the private cannot produce efficiently, maybe because of some other externality or public sector elements of them, government is producing them until the private sector is mature enough in that particular sector to start producing them. So if that works for us at the regional level, so be it. But for us as a regional, we need to recognize that the state themselves must take this thing into their hands, the future into their hands, do well, recognize that in coming together, in collaborating across the region, they can do better. They can learn from one another and then work more effectively with the federal government to develop their zones or regions, which now goes down to the citizens.
In 2024, the conversation on Nigeria's 2024 to 2026 banking recapitalization exercise gained momentum with insights from Mr. Johnson Chukwu, Group CEO of Carry Asset Management, and Mr. Tosin Ige, Head of Research, ProShare.
If you look at generally as an industry, I think the Nigerian banks carry sufficient capital. So in terms of boosting investors' confidence or confidence of the depositing public on the bank's ability to meet the obligations, I doubt if that is a compelling reason for the new capitalization. Because if you are saying that, it simply means you are saying that the current Nigerian banks carry a very weak capital base. I don't think there's any bank. I would say there's any bank. I'll say the major banks, I don't think they have any issue of capital adequacy as it stands today. They are the weak banks that the system have not been able to take care of or take out of the system. But if you exclude those ones that are talking about the industry as a whole, then you will actually say that the Nigerian banks are sufficiently capitalized, because if you look at their capital adequacy ratio, the industry is well capitalized. So I do not think additional capital that is imposed by the regulator will in any way move the needle as it relates to investors' confidence.
The industry has a matrix that, of course, and the classification that method, the FUGAS, and this is actually akin to the systemically important bank classification by the regulator. Both metrics actually uses the traditional banking industry metrics, talk about the total assets, the deposits, the credit, as well as the liquidity. And of course, they come with a cutoff point within which either it's a 1 or SIB, as the case may be, or not. But one of those things we argue is that when you look at the industry based on that tier classification code, they are based on fixed value that shows the cutoff, and for the regulator, they are based on certain ratios. So our point is that whereas this model may recognize banks that are truly influential to the financial system, they may actually undermine the dynamics, the strength, as well as the resilience of this bank. So that's why we set out with a model that is rather dynamic, that represents the efficiency of this bank, as well as also capture the banking evolution. Don't forget, in our previous edition, we have said banks are going in extinct, but banking is still
dynamic. An economist, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, also discussed the need for the central bank to prioritize moderating the high inflation rates through its monetary policy tools.
Fixed exchange rates, then free capital flows, and of course, independent monetary policy. Now, what that simply says is that it is impossible for any central bank to manage the three of them at the same time. In which case, it has to make a deliberate choice of two, and then allow the market and the system to take care of the other one. Now, the first of them, which is fixed exchange rate, of course, is an extreme end of the exchange rate management continuum. All right. The other extreme to it is the floating rate exchange system. Now, as we stand today, Nigeria certainly has moved away from fixed exchange rate system, which means that is not an instrument central bank wants to play with, because we have now an FX market that is driven by willing buyer, willing seller principle. So which means we are not dealing with fixed rates, fixed exchange rate system. So that then implies that CBN is focusing on the free capital flows on the one hand, and also independent monetary policy.
The ProShare research team led a robust conversation on the 2024 banking sector windfall tax and economic implications.
One of the things we've seen in Nigeria is an aggressive approach towards revenue generation. Everything is about revenue generation. Everything is about trying to block those gaps in our budget deficit. And what we are saying is this: taxes are also used as instruments of social engineering. And so it's not just about revenue, it's also about providing incentives for the productive sectors of the economy to grow. Now, the thing is, for us in ProShare, it's about you have to create the environment for revenue development. Then you can tax that. So you want to stimulate economic activity. Once you've stimulated the economic activity, revenues grow. And once revenues grow, they become taxable. We're saying that the government needs to focus more on how to stimulate growth in the economy. And then the profits that come from that stimulation can be taxed.
We also had the opportunity to engage Dr. Ogo Okiti, an economist and CEO of Think Business Africa, on the ongoing fiscal reforms and inclusive economic growth.
There are two major problems with tax, or let me say with government finances in Nigeria today. And or you can even say three. And it's very, very important that the fiscal policy committee attempt to deal with these three problems. One is that the government does not have adequate resources. So that is number one. If you use the non-oil tax as a ratio of GDP, the government does not have enough. The government is not collecting enough taxes. So that's number one. Number two, and you can probably say, I probably reach for now. The number two, obviously, the one that is collected is not effective. There's too much leakages. That's number two. Number three, the taxes are actually concentrated. So you need to actually broaden the number of people that actually pay taxes. And one way of knowing that the taxes are concentrated is that it's only in Nigeria or maybe one or two other countries that you have taxes that have, the dominant taxes being collected is actually corporate taxes. Whereas in many other countries, the taxes that you actually collect that actually finance the government is actually personal income tax. So that's three. And of course, number four is that we actually also have taxes that are collected by non-state actors. And we don't know where those money goes to.
The much debated 2024 tax reforms bills were also captured in our conversation as we engaged Mrs. Eunice Igwe Bernard, a tax manager with SIO Partners, and Dr. Muda Yusuf again.
With the deployment of the fiscal devices, this would also ease tax collection with the fiscalization of VAT supply. This will ease payments, which will be greatly appreciated by everybody, both individuals, both the corporate taxpayers. Then we also have the corporate tax adjustments. With the corporate tax adjustment, the current corporate tax is layered from the large companies paying 30% to the small companies that are being exempted. But with the proposed reform oncoming, we just have two grade of companies, large companies and small companies. Already, this has simplified everything for the layman. There's no where do I fall into, where don't I fall into? And then with the minimum threshold for the small companies being increased to 50 million, it has already said there's ease of payment, there's more cash available, and the complaint from everybody will be reduced. We can go on, but I know that this will make cash much more available. And with cash being much more available for operation, it will definitely ease payment for all strata of persons involved.
From a business perspective, does the proposed tax reform bill, the 2024, encourage more private sector activities, especially from manufacturing to even the activities of the MSMEs in the country?
I think it's positive for the private sector. First, there is the issue about the simplification of the tax regime. There's the issue about the reduction of the number of taxes, because right now we have the number is rather unwieldy. There's also the positive component which has to do with concessions around withholding taxes, for manufacturers, for their inputs and so on. So even there are some that are already even been gazetted, have been implemented. Those components of the tax reform that does not require, legislation. I mean, some of those things have already been implemented, particularly around withholding tax.
Yes,
yes. So there are quite a number of positives, in the tax reform.
The year 2024 has witnessed remarkable developments in the Nigerian socio-economic space. But one takeaway is the resilience of Nigerians through this current phase of reforms. There are huge expectations that 2025 will bring relief to Nigerians through the alignment of fiscal, monetary, trade, and social investment policies. To our viewers, if you want to get further insights on previous editions of the Economy and Politics program, visit the ProShare website displayed on the screen and follow our social media platforms to engage further. Until we come your way again, enrich yourself with knowledge of socio-economic developments around you. It is wise. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong signing out for 2024. This is wishing you a prosperous year 2025.